Picture this. Hollywood, 1988. The martial arts film scene is exploding, and everyone wants to be the next big thing. In a crowded gym in Los Angeles, two legends cross paths. One is rising fast, hungry for the spotlight, his ego growing with every magazine cover. The other is established, humble, content to let his legacy speak for itself. What happens next will become one of martial arts cinema's most whispered about encounters. A moment when pride met humility and arrogance learned a lesson it would never forget. This is the story of when Jean-Claude Van Damme insulted Chuck Norris and discovered that the quietest warriors often carry the sharpest swords. Some lessons can only be taught once. This was one of them. It was late afternoon when Jean-Claude Van Damme walked into the Gold's Gym on Vine Street. Fresh off his breakout role in Bloodsport, he was everywhere. Magazine covers, talk shows, billboard advertisements stretching across Sunset Boulevard. His chiseled physique and high-flying kicks had made him an overnight sensation, and he knew it. Every head turned when he entered a room. Every conversation paused. He'd worked hard to get here, clawing his way from Brussels to Hollywood, and now the world was finally recognizing his greatness. Van Damme moved through the gym like he owned it, his tank top revealing muscles that seemed carved from marble. He'd nod to admirers, flash that signature smile, occasionally stop to demonstrate a spinning kick for starstruck fans. He was 27 years old and he felt invincible. The future stretched before him like an endless red carpet. In the far corner of the gym, away from the mirrors and the crowd, Chucknorris was training quietly. At 48, he'd already built a legacy that most martial artists could only dream of. Six-time undefeated karate champion, action movie star, but more importantly, a teacher, a mentor, someone who'd helped countless young martial artists find their path. He didn't train for show. He trained because discipline was in his DNA, woven into every fiber of his being after decades of dedication. Chuck wore a simple gray sweatshirt, nothing flashy. His movements were economical, precise, the mark of someone who'd spent a lifetime perfecting his craft. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He never had to. Van Damme noticed Chuck across the gym. For a moment, something flickered in his chest. Was it respect? Recognition that he was in the presence of a true master? But that feeling was quickly swallowed by something darker. Pride, competitiveness. The gnawing need to prove he wasn't just the new guy, that he belonged at the top. He sauntered over, surrounded by a small entourage of trainers and friends. Chuck looked up briefly, offered a polite nod, then returned to his training. That nod, so simple, so dismissive in Van Damme's interpretation, ignited something in him. "Chucknorris," Van Damme said loudly, his accent thick, his voice carrying across the gym. "The legend himself. Still training? I thought legends just, rest on their old victories." A few people nearby stopped what they were doing. The air grew tense. Chuck straightened up, his expression unreadable. He'd heard worse over the years. In competition, in Hollywood, in life. He knew what this was. A young lion trying to prove himself by roaring at an old one. "Just staying in shape," Chuck replied calmly. "You look like you're doing well. Congratulations on your success." Van Damme smirked. He'd expected defensiveness, maybe even a challenge. The calm response irritated him more. "You know, Chuck, your time, it's past. This is a new era. Faster, more athletic. The old techniques, the old ways, they're finished." The words hung in the air like smoke. Several gym-goers had stopped entirely now watching. Chuck's training partner, a longtime student, tensed beside him, but Chuck placed a hand on his shoulder. "Easy, let it go." "Everyone has their time," Chuck said quietly. "I hope you enjoy yours." He turned back to his training, and that dismissal, that refusal to engage, made Van Damme's blood boil. "What, you won't even defend yourself?" Van Damme pushed. "Or maybe you know I'm right. Maybe you know that if we were in the ring right now, it would be embarrassing for you. The student surpassing the teacher, except I was never your student. I learned from better." The gym had gone silent. Even the clanking of weights had stopped. Chuck turned slowly, and for the first time, those around him saw something shift in his eyes. Not anger, something deeper. Disappointment, perhaps. Or maybe just clarity about what needed to happen next. Jean-Claude, Chuck said, his voice still level, still controlled. I have nothing to prove to you or anyone else. I've spent 30 years in martial arts. I've won my championships. I've had my career. I'm at peace with who I am. Can you say the same? Van Damme laughed, but it sounded hollow. Peace? That's what people say when they can't compete anymore. Tell you what, old man, since you're so peaceful, how about a friendly demonstration? Nothing serious. Just show these people what the legend can still do. Unless you're scared. The challenge was out there now, impossible to ignore. Chuck looked around at the faces watching him. Young martial artists, training partners, gym regulars. Some looked concerned. Others looked curious. All waited. Chuck sighed. He knew what this moment was. He'd seen it before. Pride needed to be taught, and sometimes the only teacher was experience. All right, he said simply. A friendly demonstration. As Chuck began wrapping his hands, his mind drifted back 30 years. He saw himself as a young serviceman in Korea, insecure, searching for something to give him confidence. He remembered his first tournament, the fear, the doubt. He remembered his teachers, patient and wise, who taught him that martial arts wasn't about defeating others, it was about mastering yourself. He thought about every championship, every movie role, every student he'd trained. The fame had never been the point. The belts, the trophies, the credits, they were just markers along a journey of constant self-improvement. He'd learned that the loudest warriors are often the weakest, that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. Looking at Van Damme now, Chuck didn't see an enemy. He saw a younger version of himself, talented, hungry, but missing the most important lesson. And sometimes, Chuck thought, the kindest thing you can do is teach that lesson, even if it stings. A small mat was cleared. The two men faced each other. Van Damme bounced on his feet, showing off his flexibility, his speed. He threw a few flashy kicks into the air, drawing appreciative murmurs from onlookers. He was putting on a show, playing to the crowd. Chuck stood still, centered, breathing slowly, waiting. Whenever you're ready, Chuck said. Van Damme came in fast, a combination of punches followed by his signature high kick. Fast, powerful, impressive. But Chuck wasn't there. He'd moved economically, just enough, reading Van Damme's movements like a book he'd memorized long ago. Every flashy technique telegraphed itself. Every spinning kick had a moment of vulnerability. Van Damme reset, his confidence wavering slightly. He came again, faster this time, trying to overwhelm with speed. But speed without wisdom is just wasted energy. Chuck blocked, redirected, controlled the distance. He wasn't fighting. He was teaching. 3 minutes in, Van Damme was breathing hard. Chuck looked like he'd just started warming up. The realization was beginning to dawn on the younger fighter, settling into his chest like cold water. This wasn't going how he'd imagined. Chuck moved then, not with flashy kicks or spinning techniques, but with the kind of precise, devastating simplicity that only comes from decades of mastery. A quick check to Van Damme's lead leg, a hand trap, a sweep so smooth it looked choreographed. Van Damme found himself on his back, looking up at the ceiling, Chuck's hand extended to help him up. The gym was silent. Chuck pulled Van Damme to his feet. You're very talented, he said quietly, so only Van Damme could hear. You have a gift. But talent without humility is just potential wasted. I've seen too many gifted fighters destroy themselves with ego. Don't be one of them. Van Damme stood there, his face flushed, his chest heaving. For a moment, everyone thought he might explode in anger. But instead, something cracked. The facade fell away, and underneath it was just a young man far from home, trying too hard to prove he belonged. Van Damme nodded slowly. I'm sorry, he said, and the words cost him something. That was disrespectful. You're right. I have a lot to learn. Chuck smiled then, genuinely. We all do. That's the point. The day you think you've learned everything is the day you stop growing. You're going to have a great career, Jean-Claude. Just remember, the best warriors don't need to prove they're warriors. They just are. He patted Van Damme on the shoulder and walked back to his corner of the gym. The crowd dispersed slowly, the moment already becoming a story they'd tell for years. Van Damme stood alone on the mat for a moment, processing what had just happened. He'd come in trying to tear down a legend, and instead, that legend had shown him mercy, had shown him what true strength looked like. In the following weeks, Van Damme would think about that day often. The lesson would sink in slowly, the way important lessons do. He'd learn that the loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. That respect isn't given, it's earned. And it's earned through character, not just through championship belts or box office numbers. Years later, in interviews, Van Damme would speak about Chuck Norris with genuine reverence. He'd tell the story himself, not hiding from it, but owning it as a turning point. Chuck taught me that being humble doesn't mean you're weak, he'd say. It means you're secure enough in who you are that you don't need to convince anyone else. The story of that day in Gold's Gym became part of martial arts lore, not because of the techniques displayed or the outcome of the demonstration, but because of what it represented. It was a reminder that true mastery isn't about defeating others. It's about mastering yourself, your ego, your need for validation, your insecurity. Chuck Norris didn't need to humiliate Van Damme. He could have, but instead he chose to educate him, to show him that the path forward wasn't through tearing others down, but through building yourself up with integrity and respect. In a world that often celebrates the loudest voice, the flashiest technique, the most aggressive approach, there's profound power in quiet confidence, in knowing who you are without needing to prove it, in being secure enough in your own strength that you don't need to diminish anyone else's. The warriors who have nothing to prove are often the most dangerous, not because they're looking for a fight, but because they've already fought the battles that matter. They've conquered their ego. They've learned that real strength is found in discipline, humility, and the wisdom to know when to walk away and when to stand your ground. Van Damme learned that day what Chuck Norris had learned decades before. The belt you wear means nothing compared to the character you carry. And in the end, the ultimate victory isn't over your opponents, it's over yourself. Because the quietest warriors don't need to roar. Their legacy speaks for them,